Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about hybrids and EVs, and we're going to get into why manufacturers should focus on hybrids rather than EVs. With that being said, let's get right into the video. So this is actually a pretty complex topic, so I'm going to have to kind of break this down. We're going to have to get into each individual part of the topic. So the first part is, why is this even happening? Why is there a push for this? What's happened is we've got more and more government regulation happening. By 2025, automakers have to have an average fuel economy rating of about 50 miles per gallon. So that means that automakers are going to have to build more EVs, more hybrids, vehicles with smaller engines, so they can meet that fuel economy rating that the government is pushing. So that's the first part of it, right? We just have more government regulation. Now, you also have a push from people. There's a large environmentalist movement here in the US, and that is pushing for, quote unquote, zero emissions. Now, we'll talk about whether or not that's actually realistic later in the video, but there's a big push for zero emissions, and so that pushes manufacturers to make more hybrids, more EVs, because they want to be on the side of public opinion. They don't want to be against that, right? Because that doesn't look good for the manufacturers, and so you do have that happening as well. And so between government regulation and public appeal, you've got this push to make it so that cars are more environmentally friendly, right? Now, we obviously have all these different technologies developing, and they're kind of making this more and more possible as time goes on. But this video is obviously about why manufacturers need to focus more on hybrids than EVs, and so let's kind of get into that. So first off, with fully electric vehicles, you need very large battery packs, which the production of these battery packs is still pretty controversial because of the materials that need to be mined up and the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced just to produce these battery packs. And so again, these cars that are claiming zero emissions, it's like, okay, but for that car to get created, the materials had to get mined, right? Which produced a lot of greenhouse gases. And then the car had to get produced in a factory, which some of these EV factories are going towards renewable energy to power their factories, but some of them are still just being powered normally. And so it has to be produced in a factory that releases greenhouse gases. And so it's not truly zero emissions. And then on top of that, these fully electric cars are powered by, again, electricity. And that electricity is produced via greenhouse gases for the most part. Now, again, there are some places in the US that are using more renewable energy, but most of the US is still powered via the burning of fossil fuels. And so every single time you go and charge your Tesla or whatever electric car you have, that electricity you're using to charge your car was most likely made from the burning of some sort of fossil fuel, right? So you do have that is kind of going against electric vehicles. And then I guess on the other side of things, even with a lot of these renewable energy sources like solar and wind, just to produce those items, right? The solar panels and the wind turbines, those also emit a lot of greenhouse gases to actually produce the items, right? And so it's interesting. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but I'm saying at the current state of technology, how everything is set up with our infrastructure, we release a lot of greenhouse gases to produce these, quote unquote, zero emission things. So it's just it seems kind of backwards, right? And a lot of people see that now, right? Because the information is out there. And so there is a big push away from it. And then the other push away from EVs at this point is just range and charging times and the lack of availability of charging areas, right? So first off, with range, most electric vehicles have a range between, like, on the low side 100 miles and on the high side maybe 400 miles, which is in the range of a lot of internal combustion engine cars, right? Some cars, or trucks with bigger fuel tanks, you might get more range, or something like a Toyota Prius, right, that has exceptionally high fuel economy, you might get more range than that. But a lot of internal combustion engine cars have range in that amount. So that's not too bad, right? That seems like it's relatively in line. But the problem comes with charging times and with charger availability. So Tesla has basically fixed a lot of these issues, but the problem is not everyone wants to buy a Tesla. So Tesla has a bunch of infrastructure, and so if you own a Tesla, you can probably find a charging station that is relatively close to you, and you'll be able to have a relatively quick charging time. But if you want to buy a car from another automaker because you don't like Tesla for some reason, or because Tesla is too expensive, because frankly, even though they have these inexpensive cars, most of the cars they build are a lot more expensive, then you have this issue that you're running into where you don't have availability to chargers, and the chargers you are using are going to charge your car in such a slow time period that it's just not practical, especially if you want to go on a road trip or something like that. So there is that push away from electric cars as well. We just don't have the infrastructure set up for it. And again, people can read between the lines and they can see how these vehicles are being produced and how it is claiming to help out the environment, but in reality it's not actually helping out the environment as much as it's being claimed. And that's why I think automakers need to focus on building hybrids. And the reason they should do this is it's a nice in-between, right? So with hybrids, you still have an internal combustion engine. And so what that means is, yeah, you still will go to the gas station and fill up the car. And so if you want to go on a road trip, you don't have to have range anxiety. You don't have to worry about, oh, where's the next charging port? You can just go to a gas station and fill it up. But then you also have the hybrid component, and we have more and more plug-in hybrids being offered by certain automakers. And what that actually allows people to do is then when they're driving around town or just a short distance, they can just do it in full electric mode with that car, and then when they bring it back home, they can charge it when they're at home, so then they don't use any gas. So then they are emitting less emissions. Now obviously, if they're charging it at home and the energy they get at home is via the burning of fossil fuels, that kind of defeats the purpose. But like the house I live in, it has solar, and so if I had an electric vehicle and I charged it at this house, then I would be using, again, the solar power to charge it, despite the fact that to get the solar panels up there, a lot of stuff had to happen that emitted greenhouse gas. So, you know, it's a slippery slope with everything, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that hybrids are a nice middle ground, and it's also going to get it to be easier for people to actually accept these vehicles. Because again, if someone is driving an internal combustion engine car and you want them to go to an electric car, that is a huge shift. Because not only do electric cars drive significantly different, and I'm not saying they drive poorly, but they drive a lot different. So you're going to have the person accept that, but then also a complete lifestyle change. They're going to have to go from a lifestyle where they're used to, again, being able to just stop at whatever gas station they want to and fill up their car to, okay, now I've got to look up where these different charging areas are at, and now I have to plan my day around charging, especially if I'm doing, especially if I'm driving a lot of miles. And there is, like I said earlier in the video, there is faster charging times at certain places, but still, you have the fact that they're going to run into having range anxiety, and you're going to run it, maybe you're not going to be able to have access to a fast charger, and so you're going to have to sit there for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, how long it takes to charge the car. And so that's a huge shift. But getting someone to accept a hybrid is a lot easier, because it's like, okay, it is very similar to the current vehicle you're driving, but it has this hybrid component, so you're going to get better fuel economy, and people are going to be like, oh, that's great, right? Better fuel economy. And then on top of that, it's like, oh, if you want to do, like I said with plug-in hybrids, if you want to do this full electric driving for short distances, you can do that. And people are going to be like, oh, great, that'll save me a little bit of money in terms of gas when I just want to go to the grocery store or whatever that you want to do that's close by. And it's also going to help with meeting these fuel economy ratings that car makers need to meet. And the battery packs in hybrids are significantly smaller. And so this will allow the auto industry to ramp up with battery technology and learn a little bit more about it. And it'll also allow us to figure out how to properly dispose of these batteries so that we're not leaving as much waste, rather than just, hey, let's go completely to a fully electric vehicles, and now we're going to have this huge issue where we can't deal with the waste. And then on top of that, going to fully electric vehicles, another issue is supply, right? And I guess that this is bad that I'm mentioning this on the tail end of the video, but all you guys need to know is there is a huge supply issue with all the materials that are associated with building battery packs. And so on top of everything that I mentioned in today's video, it's like near impossible to get the materials for these batteries. So what this basically means is that in the short term, going all in on EVs just doesn't really make sense. Again, it's expensive, right? There's still a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built up. We have supply issues with the materials to build these EVs. They aren't as green as they are claimed to be, and it's just not practical for regular people. And so if we shift from going all into EVs and focusing on hybrids right now, we can improve battery technology. They're not going to need as many raw materials to build these hybrids, so we're going to be able to fix these supply chain issues that we're having with the battery packs, right? If you're using a lot less materials, then it'll be easier to ramp up slowly over time rather than trying to ramp up super fast when we just don't have availability. And it'll give automakers the opportunity to figure out better methods of recycling these batteries or doing something with them, right? So that they aren't just being wasted. And so that's kind of what I think automakers should do. It's obviously not what's happening, because you've got GM that's saying they're going all in on EVs. You've got Subaru now that's saying they're going all in on EVs. And you just have all these different automakers that are jumping all in. And I think that time will tell exactly what ends up happening, because buyers ultimately determine what happens with the market. Yes, government regulation can push things in a certain direction, and automakers can push things in a certain direction, but ultimately people have to decide if they're going to buy these vehicles or not. And if these manufacturers release a bunch of EVs and people just don't buy them, then right, that's going to say everything. So I want you guys to let me know what you think on this, and if you think that we should just keep pushing more towards EVs, or if you think that we should have more focus into hybrids in the short term and then eventually shift over into EVs, kind of like what I'm talking about. And with that being said, I'll see all of you in the next video.